It's heavyweight boxing, folks. Expect the unexpected. And very few people expected this particular result right here, with American-based Polish heavyweight Adam Kownacki losing his unbeaten record in 4 rounds to Robert Helenius. Now, Kownacki came out and fought his usual fight, applying a lot of pressure, having no defense, trading on his toughness, and hoping to wear the opponent down. But Helenius came in light for this fight. In fact, let me see exactly how much he weighed. 238. And for a 6'7" man, that's pretty light. And he's not a beanpole like a Deontay Wilder, for example. Helenius is genuinely a big guy. Helenius came in shape. He had a lot of ambition this time around. Sometimes he doesn't. And basically, he took Kownacki's best shots, fired back, and Kownacki couldn't take his best shots. The first knockdown, well, both knockdowns occurred in the 4th round. The first one wasn't called a knockdown by the ref, which was absolutely absurd because it was blatant to everybody that it was a genuine knockdown. But the ref, I guess, helped Kownacki out. He got up and he was dropped again shortly afterwards. This time the referee did count it as a knockdown. He got to his feet once more and he was bludgeoned against the ropes. The ref jumped in and stopped the fight. A massive shock for all in attendance and many watching around the world. Now, why was it such a massive shock? Well, Robert Helenius has lost several times in his career. Really and truly, his first professional loss was to Derek Chisora, but he got an incredible gift decision in that fight. Years later, he was knocked out badly by Johann Duopa. Devastating knockout defeat for Helenius there. Then he lost a lopsided decision to Dillian Whyte. And most recently, he was knocked out by Gerald Washington, of all people, last year. So that's some pretty bad form, particularly the Gerald Washington loss. And of course, Kownacki had walked through Gerald Washington in 2 rounds. So really and truly, I have to imagine that Kownacki's people felt like this was going to be an easy fight. It was a cherry pick, basically, but sometimes cherry picking goes wrong. And it went wrong here for Adam Kownacki. Now, in retrospect, because hindsight is always 20/20 for all of us, in retrospect, Helenius was the first serious puncher that Kownacki had faced so far in his career. Because if you look at people like Chris Arreola, I mean, he was way past his best, but he always had decent power, but nothing to write home about. Same with Charles Martin, a sharp puncher, but nothing too devastating. Robert Helenius has always had serious power. If you go back to his fight with Derek Chisora, he hurt Chisora in the first round. And that was a fresh, young Derek Chisora. Chisora was hurt in that first round and he was holding on for dear life. When he fought Dillian Whyte, he hurt Dillian Whyte early in that fight. I remember being told that Johann Duopa said that Robert Helenius' power was either equal to Wilder's power or second only to Wilder's power. So he rated Helenius' power seriously, said he was very heavy-handed. So, and I remember way back in the days when Robert Helenius knocked out Sam Peter, for example, that was a devastating knockout. So he always could punch. As limited as Robert Helenius is, and he's always had issues with his own punch resistance, he's had issues with his stamina, he's had issues just with his boxing ability and what have you, and sometimes with his heart, his ambition. I mean, when he fought Dillian Whyte, he really came to just survive. He didn't really try to win. But he's always had that punching power. And to be fair, against Kownacki, he seemed to be a lot more up for it. Now, perhaps it's because of other factors in his life, I don't know. Or perhaps it's because stylistically, he felt like Kownacki was more suited to him than someone like a Dillian Whyte. Kownacki is a lot more simple, a lot more rudimentary than Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte's got way more dimensions to his game. And perhaps Helenius just felt like it was too difficult a puzzle to try and solve. So he just decided to try and survive against Dillian Whyte. Whereas against Kownacki, he was saying in the lead up to the fight that Kownacki's wide open. He's easy to hit. I'm going to let my shots go and I'm going to catch him. And that's exactly what he did. Kownacki gave Helenius the best shots that he could possibly muster. Helenius took him, fired back, and Kownacki couldn't take what Helenius had. Down he went. And there you go. The end of his unbeaten run. Now, to add insult to injury, because of the fact that Kownacki's people seem to have seen this as a cherry pick, there was no rematch clause in place. So Kownacki's not going to be able to run it back with Helenius anytime soon unless he wants to give Helenius all of the advantages and probably most of the money. Helenius has been saying that if he wants a rematch, we can do it in Finland, where Helenius is from. Now, Finland is in Northern Europe. It's not a million miles away from Poland. It's a viable fight probably over there in terms of fan interest and whatever. Boxing is not exactly a massive sport in Finland. And I have seen some Helenius fights over there where, he got good crowds and people were lively in the arena. So given that this is probably the best win of Helenius' career, certainly one of the best wins. I mean, Derek Chisora is more proven than Kownacki, but as I say, that wasn't really a win. This is probably the best legit win Helenius has had in his career. I know some people are going to talk about Sam Peter, but Sam Peter was way over the hill. And yeah, given all that, I think that running it back in Finland is maybe a possibility. So we'll see what happens there. It depends how badly Kownacki wants to get his revenge. Maybe he's just thinking about rehabilitating rather than going back in the ring with the same opponent right away. So yeah, a lot of people obviously are seeing this as another nail in the coffin for PBC. And of course, it's not good for them because Kownacki was being fattened up. Excuse the metaphor or the analogy, but he was being fattened up for Deontay Wilder. That was obvious that that's what they were trying to do. Did they know all along that he was this vulnerable, that he was this susceptible to being stopped like this? Is that why they didn't put him in there against Dominic Brazil? Is that why they didn't put him in there against Joe Joyce? Because those were two fights which were talked about. Then they eventually settled on Robert Helenius, which to me was a very strange choice. So who knows what happened there? Again, in retrospect, Kownacki was hurt in the Charles Martin fight. Late on in that fight, he was putting it on Charles Martin, don't get it twisted, early doors. And Martin was under a whole heap of pressure. But late in the fight, Martin battled back and he noticeably managed to stun Kownacki several times. But it was too little too late, basically. And you could see there from the scores, it was a relatively close fight over 10 rounds. 96-94 on all the judges' scorecards when he fought Charles Martin. But as I say, Robert Helenius, with that extra bit of power, was able to do more damage than Martin. And he was able to do it early in the fight and get the job done. So it is what it is. PBC, at least at heavyweight, are in a little bit of disarray. And this is why the heavyweight division is so exciting. You can go back through the history of the division and there have always been upsets at all levels. I mean, Vladimir Klitschko lost his first professional fight to a journeyman in Ross Purity. There have been, many heavyweights through the 70s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, right up until the current era, who have fallen at the first hurdle, who have lost fights even before they managed to get a heavyweight title shot. I mean, Trevor Berbick, long before he became WBC World Heavyweight Champion, was knocked out in one round. Some people might not realize that. They look at what Mike Tyson did to him and they just assume, well, nobody had done that to him before. Well, actually, they had. Trevor Berbick had been knocked out in one round before. I mean, Mike Weaver was a heavyweight champion at one stage in the 1980s. And he had lost, 8 times or something, or 10 times by the time he became world heavyweight champion. Oliver McCall must have been 5 losses or whatever it was by the time he beat Lennox Lewis and became champion. Buster Douglas had multiple losses by the time he'd fought Mike Tyson. And Buster Douglas had lost at a much lower level than world level. So this is just how heavyweight boxing goes. I was having a discussion in my Facebook boxing group, going back through the 90s in particular, thinking about all of the heavyweight contenders that there were in the 90s. Contenders which people don't really talk about now. Contenders which you wouldn't really know about unless you were around in the 90s watching heavyweight boxing back then. People like Alex Garcia, people like Joe Hipp, people like Francesco Damiani, People like Gary Lane. I mean, Gary Lane, when he knocked out Alex Garcia, he got a top 10 ranking. Gary Lane was a tough journeyman, but he was a journeyman. And he got a top 10 ranking after knocking out Alex Garcia. You know, Joe Hip was a Native American heavyweight contender. He fought people like Burt Cooper. Actually, Burt Cooper gave Joe Hip his first loss. That was an upset at the time, Joe Hip losing to Burt Cooper. Joe Hip also fought Tommy Morrison. That was a brutal fight where Joe Hip actually broke Morrison's jaw, but eventually Morrison stopped him. Hip's face was an absolute mess in that fight. And again, at the time, people like Joe Hip were relatively highly touted at one stage in the 1990s. But how many people have heard of Joe Hip? And he wasn't very good. No disrespect to the guy. He was almost a bit of a novelty because of the fact that he was Native American. How many Native American professional boxers do you know? Very few. So, yeah, Joe Hip. And there were many other contenders around. Lionel Butler, a journeyman. He, after stringing a few wins together in the 90s, was considered to be a top 10 contender at one stage. Wasn't it Lionel Butler who was knocked out by Riddick Bowe on Bowe's debut? I swear Riddick Bowe beat Lionel Butler in like a round on his debut. And Lionel Butler went on to be somewhat of a contender at one stage in the heavyweight division. He strung together a load of knockout wins, and he was essentially trying to be a budget version of Mike Tyson. He basically had the black shorts and the black shoes, and he was trying to fight in a Mike Tyson type style. I remember watching him against Bone Crusher Smith, a way, way over the hill, washed up Bone Crusher Smith. And I was watching it with one of my friend's dads, and he was like, man, look at this guy, some phony Mike Tyson. So, yeah, the heavyweight division has always had contenders who have fallen at the first hurdle or before the first hurdle. Some of them come back to redeem themselves, i.e. Vladimir Klitschko and many others. I mean, again, Oliver McCall came back and made something of himself. Buster Douglas. Some people come back, other people don't. So we'll have to see which type of contender Adam Kownacki is. Is he going to fade away into obscurity like a Francesco Damiani or a Joe Hip? Or is he going to come back? He's certainly going to need to employ some more boxing. He's certainly going to need to be more cognizant of his defense because his chin didn't hold up to Robert Helenius' power. It's not going to be able to hold up to the likes of Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, maybe even Dylan White. So defense will need to be improved dramatically if he's ever going to go anywhere. And I know that in the lead up to this fight, he said that his newborn baby has been keeping him awake at night. Obviously, his partner, his wife, whoever it is, has been doing the majority of care for the baby while Kownacki was in camp. But still, when a baby is screaming in the night, it's going to disturb your sleep. And that's not a good thing in the lead up to a fight. I'm not saying that's the reason he lost, but things like that can affect you to some degree, particularly if you're going into a fight thinking it's a cherry pick anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe his mentality wasn't what it should have been. So yeah, it's a blow for the PBC. Not looking good for them. Who have they got right now? They got Charles Martin. Wilder's obviously going to have the rematch with Fury. Kownacki has taken several steps back. They've got Efe Ajagba. Ajagba actually fought as well. And he managed to stop Razvan Kajanu late in that fight. And in isolation, I'll talk about that in a separate video, but in isolation, stopping Razvan Kajanu in 9 rounds or whatever it was, is not particularly concerning in isolation because obviously Daniel Dubois knocked out Kajanu in 2. I think Luis Ortiz did a similar job. The fact that Ajagba didn't, styles make fights, but when you also factor in Ajagba being dropped in his previous fight by Kaladze, who's a cruiserweight, I think those 2 fights back to back are enough to just tell people to pump the brakes a little bit on the Ajagba hype because he's shown plenty of vulnerability in his last 2 fights. Yeah, the Kaladze fight in particular, but also he looked fairly pedestrian, I think, against Razvan Kajanu. I know people say that Joseph Parker went the distance with Kajanu, but that was a very long time ago. Since then, Kajanu has been leveled a couple times. In fact, no, sorry. Did Kajanu fight Luis Ortiz? Or am I thinking of somebody else? Did he fight? I think he fought Luis Ortiz, didn't he? I'm sure he did. I know he got knocked out by that American southpaw heavyweight with one punch. I think that was Kajanu's first professional loss. And since then, I think he got knocked out by Ortiz. I'm sure he did. And he definitely got knocked out in 2 rounds by Dubois. So he's been stopped several times since the Joseph Parker fight. Yeah. So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about this upset, Kownacki losing to Robert Helenius, the demise of PBC potentially. You know, one of the problems with PBC is that so much of the reputation of their fighters is built on lies. And I know that all promoters are going to bend the truth or straight up lie to some degree. But the extent to which PBC is built, the reputation of its fighters is built on lies and deception is untenable at this point. It is a house or a castle built on foundations of sand. That's what PBC has become. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Al Heyman is going to have to be more real with the public. Stop all the shenanigans and playing and all this kind of business. No, you're not going to be able to fool the public into believing that your fighters are better than everybody else because they're going to get found out. Deontay Wilder just got found out. Adam Kownacki just got found out. And if he'll let his middleweights go anywhere near matchroom middleweights or golden boy middleweights, they might get found out too. So all the smoke and mirrors can only last but so long. A boxing ring is a truth machine. Yeah. And Al Heyman is going to have to be more truthful about what he's doing if he wants to succeed in the long run. And I'll leave it with this on the subject of PBC. Adam Kownacki was offered $7 million to fight Anthony Joshua last year, which he turned down. Now, based upon his performance in the Helenius fight, he probably would have got knocked out by Anthony Joshua. It probably would have worked out much better for AJ in terms of his career, because I don't think he would have taken a loss against Kownacki. Kownacki doesn't have the speed. He doesn't have the skill of an Andy Ruiz. Doesn't have the chin, I don't think, of an Andy Ruiz either. So it probably would have worked out a lot better for AJ. Probably would have just, banged Kownacki out in a couple rounds. And Kownacki, rather than losing to Helenius for a couple $100,000, you could have lost to AJ for $7 million. And on paper, it looks a lot better losing to AJ for $7 million. You could just say, oh yeah, well, he wasn't quite ready for the step up, but he still got a nice, check out of it. And he lost to the heavyweight champion at the end of the day. No shame in that. But losing to Helenius, oh no, for a couple $100,000, that's not a good look. And I was listening to a Boxing Beats and Rhymes video, and he was saying that Al Heyman has been a terrible advisor for many of his fighters over the past couple of years, and I can only agree. What awful advice would lead Adam Kownacki to turning down $7 million to face Anthony Joshua? Same goes for Luis Ortiz, turning down all that money to face AJ. Same goes for Deontay Wilder, of course, the clown prince of PBC, turning down all that money, $120 million, to fight his mandatory Brazil, who he was going to face anyway, and 2 fights with AJ. I mean, the mentality, the lack of intelligence, the dangerously low IQ that would lead a man to allow himself to be convinced to turn down opportunities like that. It's frightening. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's Hatman, I'm out. Hatman merch is now available. We got t-shirts, vests, hoodies, and more. Just click the link below. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.